Landlords in New York City helped defeat a bill that would have prevented them from doing background checks on prospective tenants. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's actually an update to a video that I did just a little while back, and it was going over the fact that there was people in New York who wanted to prevent landlords from being able to do background checks on their prospective tenants. Okay, now their logic said that, hey, you know, these background checks, a lot of the people with criminal backgrounds are ethnic minorities, and so this disproportionately affects certain racial groups, right? And so they wanted to get rid of the criminal background check so that they could make housing more equitable. Well, the problem was that, hey, this opened the door to just a whole slew of problems, okay? And that meant that landlords would no longer be able to get rid of these really problem tenants before they even moved into the property, because they would have no way to verify that these were good people or not. So you could have a case of, like, for example, a person who just got out of prison for, you know, theft, and you just, you know, signed them up to move into your place, and now they're breaking into the other units in your apartment building and stealing from the other tenants, and you had no way of telling because you couldn't do a background check. But before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think of this sort of legislation. I know I asked this question before in the last video I did, but do you think it's a good idea for landlords to be unable to do any sort of background investigation on their tenants? I think that's ridiculous, okay? I think it is idiotic. And I think the people in New York, they knew better. And I'm glad that this thing did not pass, and for now, and hopefully it doesn't pass in the future. So, this article comes from therealdeal.com, and it says, landlords defeat criminal history bill for now. Tenant advocates say owner lobby misconstrued the background check bill. Yeah, and like it says in the title, for now, which means this will probably come up again. I know that in Philadelphia, which I did another video on, this is already passed, okay? So this is destined to happen, especially in a place like New York. It's a very tenant-friendly place. It's a place where landlords are slowly having all of their rights chipped away, okay? So let's get into it. A bill that would have prevented landlords from running criminal background checks on prospective tenants died in the year's final city council session after a landlord group's 11th hour opposition effort. Tenant advocates said the Rent Stabilization Association's counter-campaign, in which owners and tenants urged lawmakers to reject the measure, relied on scare tactics and misconstrued the bill's likely impact. After reports yesterday that the legislation had lost too much support to pass, RSA President Joseph Strasburg made his way to City Hall Wednesday to make sure the measure stayed dead. Yeah, and these landlord groups, they are doing what they have to do in order to make money and stay in business, okay? They know this is a poisonous, bill that they were proposing, and it would have really made it difficult for us to do our jobs in terms of tenant screening, okay? So they could easily turn a profitable venture into something that wasn't profitable just by putting a bad tenant into that property. And that's not what we want to do. So, I'm glad they went all out. They put pressure on the city council to make sure that this thing didn't pass. I've seen games played in the past where last minute you think it's over and they pop it in, Strasburg said. But it's clear that there is an overwhelming number of members who oppose the legislation if it came to a vote. Strasburg said the bill would have created a liability for owners and a worry for tenants. He said if a landlord rented to someone with a record who went on to commit a crime in the building, the owners could be vulnerable to lawsuits from tenants. And that's a good case. It's something I didn't even think about. But yeah, you could be held liable for putting a problem tenant in there. You never know. People get sued for all sorts of reasons, okay? So, New York landlords, and especially New York City landlords, they've been, taking a lot of hits lately, okay? The eviction moratorium in the state of New York is actually still ongoing until January. So this is, one small victory, but hey, it's better than nothing. Okay, so it's good news, and it's not passing, as they said though, yet, and there still is a good chance that this could come up again in the future. They sue the owner because the owner's got insurance, Strasburg said. Tenants, he said, want to know if their neighbor had done time. He used the hypothetical of a hate crime convict moving into a small building occupied by members of the targeted community. Criminal background checks are just one tool for preventing such a scenario, Strasburg said, but landlords use them with discretion, he said. And that's the truth, okay? The real people who are going to be suffering through all of this, it isn't the landlord, okay? Most likely, the other tenants are going to be suffering a lot worse if they have to deal with crime and criminals who are being put into the units. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm saying that no one with any sort of criminal history should ever be rented to. No, that's the sort of extreme that all the tenants' right activists, they always say. No, I'm saying that, hey, this is a landlord's discretion. So when I look at a criminal background history, okay, if I see a DUI, that happened 5 years ago on a tenant's background, I don't care. You think I care about some DUI that happened 5 years ago? No, okay? I care if, there's major violent crimes, prison time, things like theft, etc. Okay, that scares me. Sex offenders, that scares me. I don't want to put those people in my property because it scares the other tenants. It could be a problem for the other tenants, and this person already has a reputation for being a problem. So it doesn't help, okay? So yeah, the landlord needs to be able to have that discretion. No owner is going to say absolutely no way just because someone committed a crime, because that person could have been in jail for marijuana before it became legal, Strasburg said. The Fortune Society, a nonprofit that helps formerly incarcerated New Yorkers find housing, campaigned to pass the bill. It called discrimination by property owners against ex-offenders rampant. We see blanket discrimination, no matter how long ago it was, no matter the degree of rehabilitation the person has shown, no matter whether a person would have been a good tenant, Fortune Society CEO Joanne Page said. Yeah, well, you know what? Certain crimes, it doesn't matter how long ago they were. Okay? If somebody murdered somebody else, it's like, well, that was 10 years ago. That was a long time ago. No. Okay? That's just one example. And there's a reason why, a lot of landlords, they need to have this sort of discretion. And these people, they look at it from the perspective of, oh, well, these people are all good. Well, believe me, if you'd been burned as many times as a lot of these landlords have been burned, you would be just a little bit more cautious too when doing your tenant screening. Okay, and yeah, you might have a blanket, nobody who's been convicted of a violent felony will ever be able to rent my place. Hey, that's perfectly fine, because maybe you don't want a violent felon in your property. And that's just part of the punishment that they receive. Hey, there's consequences to your actions when you commit crimes, and that's the truth, okay? And being an ex-criminal is not a protected class. In a 2007 survey of more than 600 landlords, 2/3 said they did not accept applicants with criminal backgrounds. That is one reason formerly incarcerated people are more likely to be homeless, which in turn makes them more vulnerable to recidivism. That cycle disproportionately affects people of color, who are more likely to be arrested and convicted in the first place. Well, the fact that formerly incarcerated people are more likely to be homeless doesn't have to do with just the fact that landlords aren't renting to these people at as a higher rate, okay? A lot of the people who are incarcerated have mental illness. A lot of the people who are incarcerated have drug problems. A lot of the people who are incarcerated, they are actively criminal, and, they will not make the best tenant. And so that is the reason why a lot of landlords do not want to put these people into their properties. And if they don't realize that fact, then, they have a real issue. Now, the problem I have is that, simply put, they put on, they think that landlords shouldn't have any discretion whatsoever in who they put in their property. Everyone has a right to housing. No. Simply put, This is a private business, and the landlord can, choose not to serve these violent criminals, these people with these criminal records, if they choose not to. They are not a protected class. But people with criminal records aren't necessarily predisposed to reoffend. The Fortune Society pointed to a 2006 research paper that found 6 to 7 years after previous offenders' last arrest, their risk of committing a new crime is nearly the same as that of someone with no record. And that might be true, okay? But keep in mind, I'm a law enforcement officer. So the thing we see a lot is these people, they are constantly, getting in and out of trouble. There's a lot of people like that. And if a person is constantly getting in and out of trouble, then that is the person you don't want to be renting to, okay? So if you're 6 to 7 years in the future, this person hasn't been arrested that whole time, this person has held a job, been a good citizen since they got out of prison that whole time, then maybe we will be a little more lenient and take a further look at this person. But you have to prove yourself 6 to 7 years first, okay? So yeah, good news for landlords up in New York. I'm glad that this thing isn't going to pass. I absolutely hated the bill, and I'm pretty sure that most other landlords hated it too.